Good evening, everyone. So here we are on day 9 of our 30-day challenge, and we're doing a bit of different lighting, or attempting some tonight, in that we had some suggestion, and it's true, we do have one light, mainly in this big room, so we've tried moving it around and seeing so that I don't look like I have a halo, although I can still see the bright light over the top, so we'll do the best we can. But we've just changed the position in the room. So tonight we're going to have a look at how we get disempowered in life, how we end up kind of as a shell of ourselves. And it begins very early. So when a baby is born, and we talked about this briefly the other night, that when a baby is born, it comes from a place of unity consciousness. And it is deeply connected to all the things that travel with it for the first 6 months of its life. And it looks at the mother as though it is the mother. It looks at the breast as though it is the breast, the father, the puppy, whatever's in its gaze, it is it. It is one thing. And it's something that we enter with and then lose and then spend the rest of our lives trying to find it back again. So we hide ourselves from ourselves and then spend the rest of our lives trying to find ourselves again. Probably the best game of hide and seek we've ever played, but yeah, it can be troublesome at times too. So as I said, this travels along quite nicely until the baby's about 6 months of age. And if you've ever nursed a young infant, a baby under a few months of age, and when it's looking at you, it's also looking at everything around you. Anyone that's nursed a baby has watched it suddenly look up to your left shoulder and open its eyes and be quite amazed at what it sees there. And it's quite fascinating because they're clearly seeing things that we have long since lost the ability to see. And around 6 months of age, that deep connection starts to fade for all of us. And as I said, a baby at that age goes through what's called separation anxiety. And the anxiety comes from that if I am separate from my mother, then what if my mother goes away and forgets me? And so you can understand from a baby's point of view how terrifying that is. It knows it can't feed itself, clothe itself. It is completely dependent upon this creature. And so the thought of her being separate and going away introduces such an overwhelming sense of anxiety that anxiety can actually kill the child, as nasty experiments in Egypt at the end of the Second World War clearly demonstrated. But fortunately, we don't do that thing anymore. So the anxiety, as I said, that's where it comes from. So how does the baby resolve this anxiety? Because they stay like that for a couple of months and then it all calms down. And what happens in that time is that the baby turns the parents into gods. It deifies the parents. These are the gods who can do no wrong. She can't possibly forget me or lose me, therefore I am safe. However, for the child, we are not gods in the way that the child presumes then. And so from that moment on, whenever the parents behave in ungodlike or worse, sick and crazy ways, and that does happen sometimes, that whenever the mother, during a moment of tiredness or exhaustion or pain, does not meet the needs of its infant straight away, the baby has to wait for a feed or wait to be picked up and nurtured or wait to get out of these wet and uncomfortable clothes. Then the baby takes that if the mother's not responding to my needs instantly, then somehow this is my fault. In some way, I am flawed. And they are doing this to me to teach me the error of my ways. Now, babies operate from a very limited understanding of what the world's about. So this is the baby's first irrational thought. And it's really the subsequent cause of a great deal of pain from that moment on. Because to be flawed in the presence of the gods is deeply shameful. So the baby takes that thought that I am not good enough and puts it into the deep unconscious and pretends it's not there because it's too shameful to be broken in the presence of the perfect gods. But from that moment on, every time mum yells or dad yells or my needs aren't being met or the teacher tells me off, it's a reaffirmation to the child, to the infant and subsequently the child, that who I am is not enough. And they take all of those experiences and they bury them in the unconscious, and then they pretend they're not there. They forget about it. And we hate those parts of ourselves that didn't get their needs met. We don't hate those who didn't meet our needs. We take it out on ourselves. And this gets repeated over and over again. And then because the baby is aware of that, and at the bottom of all human suffering is the belief that who we are is not enough. So the baby then sets up, or the child then sets up what's called compensatory buffers. And this is a term from CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, and it means that we set up buffer zones of compensation to deny that we're not good enough, to pretend that we're not. And so there's a lot of these, but I'll just mention a couple. There's the hurry up driver, where we keep ourselves so frenetically busy over and over again in life. We're just doing all the time. We're distracting. We've got a list of 20,000 things to do all the time. And what we're doing there is making sure that we are so busy that there is no time for this stuff to come up from the deep unconscious and remind us that this is how we're feeling about ourselves. Another one is intellectualization, where we think we understand things, we hang a label on it and we put it in a pigeonhole and we believe we've dealt with it, but we haven't. Another one is the be strong driver. And this one is quite strong in our family, but it is in a lot of people too, where, you might be exhausted, you might be tired, you just need to lie down and have a rest, for God's sake. But there's that energy inside us that says, keep going, soldier on, be strong, don't let anyone see that you're weak. And this is so common in society. I mean, the World Health Organization estimates that well over 90% of people in the world function this way, in a dysfunctional way. So welcome to normality, my darlings. But it's not a healthy normality, of course. And so what's happening with the Be Strong driver is, and it is so common, they actually make ditties on television about it, the Codral Cold tablet. Take a pill and soldier on. Don't listen to your body. Don't listen to what you need. Do that Be Strong thing. And what that's all about is so that nobody can ever find out, including yourself, that you're only half as good as you need to be. So that whole mechanism is designed to deny that I'm not enough. And we will force ourselves to soldier on into sickness, into ill health, into whatever's required, rather than looking at the fact that there's something inherently flawed with me. And it is so common, and everyone plays the same game, that when you start to change this, when you actually start to resolve some of these issues and let go and become more human and become more self-centered, caring for self first, when we start doing that, you'll get a lot of resistance because people are used to you being and behaving in a certain way. And when you start taking care of yourself better and not responding to those urges, people will kind of, again, up the ante to put you back in the box. Whereas in truth, we must all learn to be, it's like the lioness in the jungle. And I'm not sure where I heard this from originally, but it makes a lot of sense to me. That the lioness, when she's out there doing her thing and she's raising cubs, she hunts, she kills, and she gorges. And she eats solidly until she can't fit anything else in. Now, if there's food left over, the cubs will eat. If not, they go hungry. But that just makes them better hunters in the long run. But it's a kind of anathema to us. Most people would go themselves hungry before they'd not feed their children. But the lioness is a very wise creature. She knows that if she keeps herself strong and powerful, then she will raise those cubs to adulthood. But if she weakens herself by taking care of them ahead of herself, then she can get sick and die, thus guaranteeing their death. We must all learn to be like the lioness in our own jungle. We must all learn to take care of ourselves first and foremost. And when you start doing that, you'll be called selfish or cold or whatever. You're none of those things. And what's wrong with being selfish anyway? Like that lioness, if we're caring for ourselves, if we're looking after ourselves, then everything around us is okay. But if we're taking care of everything else around us until we're running on empty, then nothing around us is okay. So remember to be your own lioness. Now, so this is how the process begins. And then it's compounded by what's called the roasting pan theory of life. And it's not really a theory, that would be a bit pretentious, but it's based on an incident that happened for a woman who was going through this process many years ago and observing her life, examining her life in the way that Socrates implores us to do. Who am I? Why do I do these things? Why do I do this? Why do I think this? Where did that thought come from? Whose thought is it? And so she woke up one day as she's preparing a roast meal, and she noticed that she was cutting the end off a rolled piece of beef before she cooked it. And she thought, that's a particularly odd thing that I'm doing. Why am I doing that? And she thought, well, I've always done it. Mum did it. So she rang her mother and said, why do you cut the end off the rolled piece of meat before you cook it? And the mother thought about it for a while and thought, God, I really don't know. Granny did it. Let's talk to her. So they rang Granny and they asked her why she cut the end off the roast before she cooked it. And she said, oh, it's very easy, my dears. When I first got married, I had a very small roasting pan. And so that ritual of cutting off the end of the beef to cook it had been handed on. It had become ritualized and handed down for a couple of generations. And the people who were doing it a couple of generations later had no reason to do it, but it had become ritualized and normal. And lovies, I promise you, pretty well everything you do is a ritual. Every behaviour you partake in, every thought you have, and of the 60,000 thoughts you have today, you had 59,599 of them yesterday. And everything we do is a ritual, but we rarely stop and examine, why do I do this? Why do I have to water the garden this way, feed the dog that way? Why do I have to think about this way or that way? It's something that's been handed on to you by well-meaning, well-intentioned adults who had the same thing done to them when they were children by well-meaning, well-intentioned adults, and ad nauseum back through the line it goes. Now, this is particularly important in terms of how it impacts on our emotions, okay? Now, our emotions were shut down early in life by well-meaning, well-intentioned people who had the same thing done to them, as I've just explained. And there might have been a reason once upon a time in a war or a famine or whatever where children had to be kept quiet and not make noises and not feel. But the effect of this in terms of who we are and our authentic self is really quite profound. So let's look at a few of the emotions. So fear, for example, okay? Now, little Johnny's 5 years of age. He goes and talks to his dad and he says, Dad, I'm afraid of the monsters under the bed. Now, for every child, there is a period of their evolution and development when the monsters under the bed are very bloody real, okay? They exist. But your average well-intentioned dad will say, oh, don't be silly, son. There's no such thing as monsters. Now, in that moment, the child says to itself, I can't trust this emotion of fear. It gets me made wrong by the gods. There's no such thing. And the gods are perfect and therefore I am safe. So I can't trust this feeling that says I'm unsafe. And it gets me humiliated by the gods. Don't be silly. There's no such thing. And so the little boy learns to dampen down that emotion of fear, to not respond to it, to not listen to it, to not trust it. But the thing is, fear teaches us about our inherent safety in life. Fear is the emotion that says to us, don't get into that car with those drunken hoons. They're going to wrap you around a Stobie Paul before the night is over. Don't get into a relationship with that human. They're going to chew you up and spit you out. But when fear is suppressed in that way, then for the rest of that child's life, they're going to walk into unsafe situations with unsafe people because they've learned not to trust the feeling of fear. It's much better to say to that little boy, I remember when there were monsters under the bed. Let me give you a magic word to banish them. And in that moment, you've validated the child's experience of fear. You've empowered him to navigate through it. And he'll use the abracadabra. And I banish all monsters, abracadabra. And the monsters do go away. But he has learned to trust that emotion of fear that says, danger, Will Robinson. Okay? So Abracadabra, by the way, is a really interesting word. It comes originally from the Aramaic, and it's pronounced differently. We've bastardized it in English, but it literally translates into "as I speak it, so I create it." So it's a nice one to give your kids to banish the dark. So anger is another one that children are not allowed to feel. Now, you look at your average 18-month-old toddler or 2-year-old toddler having a tantrum because it's not getting the chocolate biscuit, okay? Now, parents will often react to that in several ways that have been conditioned by their parents. They get angry at the child, "Don't you get angry with me," or threatened with violence, or sent to their room. And when a child's sent to its room in that way, it's a death sentence for a child, by the way, okay? When a child's losing its temper and having a tantrum for not getting the chocolate biscuit, in that moment, it's completely out of control. And it's terrified by its own loss of control. It's angry, overwhelmed, and terrified. And in the moment where it needs reassurance and love that you're going to be okay, this is just a process, this is just a feeling, what the wounded inner child of the parent does is say to that little child, "Go to your room." And when you can put on the robot mask, when you can put on the happy face, when you can come out and behave like a civilized human being as I see it, then you can rejoin me. We actually teach our children to be inauthentic in that moment. Much better when a child's having a temper tantrum is to simply pick it up and give it a hug and say, "You know, I understand that you're angry. You're still not getting the chocolate biscuit because we're going to have dinner soon, but you're allowed to be angry about it." And you pop the child down and it'll have that tantrum for 30 more seconds and then it's gone, it's done. And over the next few years, the child will learn to moderate its own angry response and the tantrums cease. But the importance of anger is that it teaches us about our boundaries. Anger is the emotion that shows this is where I stop and you start. Anger is the emotion that draws the line in the sand. Anger is the emotion that says, "You said what to me? I don't think so, buddy." But when anger is suppressed like that, then the child has no defense against others. And so for the rest of that child's life, people are just going to walk all over them because they don't know how to respond to the emotion that says enough. No. And when a child's sent to its room and it's a death threat, because sure, they're sending me into my room now, but next time it's out into the forest with the bears, and that's exactly how children think. The little kid's going, "Don't feel anger, don't feel anger, it gets me threatened with death." So it learns to bury it. So it learns not to have clear boundaries. Much better, as I said, when you treat it differently, so that the child can learn to trust anger, express anger in healthy ways, and say, "No, that's not okay. This is where I stop and you start." It's important. One of the ways you can tell if you do bury anger in that way that you were taught as a child is to watch how often you make excuses for other people's behaviour. "Oh, they're tired. Oh, that's just their nature. Oh, they've had a hard day," okay? Whenever you are making excuses for someone else's behaviour, you are swallowing anger in the way that you were taught to do as a child. And you need to learn to stop doing that, okay? You need to learn to stop, own the feeling, feel it, and say what is appropriate there and then, okay? Because if you keep swallowing anger like that, turning it in on yourself instead of out there to the person where it belongs, then enough anger turned in like that has got nowhere to go except into depression. And that's often what depression is. Anger without enthusiasm turned in on the self until you are hopeless and lost. So let your kids have temper tantrums. They pass quickly. They mean nothing. And as I said, over time, the child will moderate it. Sadness. You watch your average human being around a crying infant. As soon as an infant starts crying, absolutely every adult within cooey comes rushing in and says, "Shush, shush, 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 there, stop that, it's all right, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry." And what's going on in there is the wounded inner child of the parent who never got to express their grief either is going, "I don't know how to deal with your grief, so I don't know how to deal with yours, so shush, 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 stop it." And as they get older, stop that noise or I'll give you something to cry about, or something along those lines. But the sadness is about our very evolution. Sadness is the emotion that we experience when something joyful has left our life. And the sadness, the grief that we feel when we fall over and skin our knee, the grief for the loss of the joy we were just experiencing. Grief when our little friend leaves town, when our goldfish dies, when our puppy dies. Grief, okay? Where grief lets us let go of attachment to that which is past, which creates space in us then for something new to come in and take us forward. But because children are shut down from feeling grief over and over again, boys get it particularly in a not so good way. Don't cry, don't feel, be a man, suck it up, okay? So that in the end, we're not experiencing our emotional life. We are bottling it all up until we are filled to the gunnels with it. And then our body starts making us sick, okay? You know, sadness turned in like that. I've come to believe over many years that underpinning a lot of cancer in the world and serious illness is unresolved grief. Where it manifests in the body will tell you what the grief is about, you know. Breast cancer, very much to do with not being nurtured enough as a child. Cancer of the reproductive system, not being able to have any power in life, you know. But the whole world is drowning in this ocean of unresolved grief. It's one of the great calamities of humanity. And people will die rather than deal with it, because if it's too scary for the gods to go there, who are perfect after all, therefore I am safe, then I'm not going there. No, it's not worth it. Too terrifying. Because when we start to feel those feelings after this, whenever we feel them, we're immediately transported back in time to when it was being done to us the first time over, and we are paralysed with fear. So, well, nope, not doing that, okay? So when a baby cries, let it cry. I mean, seriously, I'm not being unkind. Always meet a baby's needs, always, okay? Always, particularly when they're very, very young. And do what you can to resolve it, but let it know that it's okay to cry. And when you're walking around with a baby on your shoulders at 3 a.m. and it's crying, rather than saying, shush, stop, shush, stop, shush, stop, just say, I'm here, it's okay, you're going to be all right, okay? But yes, always address hunger, thirst, discomfort, wind, while you're doing that, okay? It matters. But yes, we are drowning in an ocean of unresolved grief, and we're going to have to find a solution to that. Even joy. Have you ever seen a 3 or 4-year-old galloping about the paddock, shrieking with sheer delight with other children around the same time? And they are so in the moment, building castles in the air and having divine adventures. In that moment, they are in their power, in the moment, fully, solidly alive. And of course, because our parents have no power, that's one of the first things they drum out of us. Will you bloody kids settle down? Will you stop running? Will you stop jumping? Will you be quiet? And so in the end, this beautiful, fulsome being that has come in, radiating and having access to all of the emotions that it needs to grow and understand and resolve its issues in life, is learning to bury all that. Until in the end, we're not feeling much. We're not trusting ourselves much. We're feeling humiliated every time we feel anything. We're feeling wrong every time we feel anything, guilty, ashamed, until in the end we're putting on different masks for different people to stay safe in an unsafe world. And we can all relate to that. So what do we do about it, eh? So let me try and explain this in a simple way. You are riding the chariot of your life. Your life is the chariot. And it's pulled, for the sake of understanding, by 4 horses. There's the physical horse, the emotional horse, the psychological horse, and the spiritual horse. And those 4 horses are pulling the chariot, you in the chariot that is your life, to whatever your responsibility in life is. And what do you think your responsibility in life is? Lots of people will come up. Oh, well, I've got to have a good job. I've got to raise a good family. I've got to be a responsible citizen. No. Your responsibility in life comes from the word itself. It's to respond to what makes your heart sing. And if you're doing anything in life and you're not filled in joy in the moment for doing it, even something as simple as the dishes, then you are not living. You are not responding to life. You are locked in the program, doing whatever you have to do to be safe in an unsafe world. Okay, so find what makes your heart sing and follow that. And if you know what makes your heart sing, then you turn the 4 horses and they will take you there straight away. But the trouble is, for all of us, because of this, most of our horses are a bit crippled and lame. Okay, so even if you can figure out what makes your heart sing, the horses are kind of just going around in a rut. And the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth of the trench, I kid you not. And most therapy, most intervention will focus on the psychological horse. And you can make that bugger very strong. You can teach it about the prison bars of the mind, about the script you were given as a childhood, about who you're allowed to be, or who you're not allowed to be, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. That script that's laid down into you by the time you're 4 years of age, in blood and stone by the time you're 6, and then you act it out for the rest of your life, like the script of a play. And you'd be terrified if you knew what's in there. It'll tell you how old you are when you're going to die. It'll tell you what you're going to die of. It's going to tell you whether you're going to be successful in life or not, whether you're going to get married, have children. It's all built into that early script. Everyone's allocated roles in the family, handed on generation after generation without thought or conscious awareness. And so you can make, as I said, the psychological horse very strong, but it can't do it by itself. It's still pulling the other 3 crippled and lame at the front of the chariot, and you're still going around in a rut. So you have to work on all 4 of your horses, beloveds. You have to make the physical horse very strong. You are what you eat. I cannot stress it enough. We've all grown up in a world of agribusiness where we are taught and given food that isn't food. Now, in this day and age, we're all going back to understanding that fresh is best, organic is better. It's sad that organic food is so much more expensive than a Macca's and chips. I find it appalling. In places in America, there are what they call the food deserts, where you have to travel 20 miles to buy a piece of fruit. But there are 15 McDonald's in that 20-mile drive, etc. Okay? But you are what you eat. So there are ways of making the physical horse very strong. Body work, really, really good, okay? There are certain kinds of body work practice like Lomi Lomi, the Polynesian body work, sometimes called Kahuna, but Kahuna is actually the teacher of secrets. The practice itself is Lomi Lomi. And you get a series of regular Lomi Lomi and you take your emotional pain into those, and it's as good as a year's psychotherapy, I kid you not. Yoga, so good for the body and the mind. Releasing the knots and the twists where enough pain is locked down in the body. And, you know, these bodies are made to live much longer than they do live. The reason they get sick and die is because the body is saying, what do I have to do to get your attention that you've got all this shit buried in here? How sick do I have to make you before you pay attention and heal? And as I said, many people will be willing to die rather than face the pain, which terrified their gods. So work on the physical horse, move, do yoga, Pilates also, but yoga in particular because of its spiritual connotations. Get good, decent Polynesian bodywork. It's bloody amazing. I used to be a Lomi Lomi practitioner myself many years ago in a galaxy far, far away, and I learned more about the physical body in those years than anything I could have read in 1,000 books. And you are what you eat. Eat healthily, eat well, drink lots, pay attention to herbs and delicious things like apple cider vinegar, you've no idea, and bicarb soda. They are so de-inflaming of the body. And as I said, you can make the psychological horse very strong too. You can teach it about the prison bars of the mind. You can teach it about the compensatory buffers. You can teach it about the script. You can actually deprogram it, because when you do a script analysis with someone, where you actually find out what they've got buried in the deep unconscious, what the hot spots are, and then you feed that back to them, then in that moment, they absolutely recognize that they've been programmed. And the good thing about knowing that you've been programmed is you can deprogram yourself. And that's what things like the affirmations, the deleting the negative thoughts, the gratitude prayer, that's part of the deprogramming of the negative rubbish in your head, okay? And if you're really deeply interested in doing, understanding what your personal hotspots are and removing them, then a script analysis can be done, particularly with TA practitioners, transactional analysis practitioners. So it's a very empowering thing to hear your script. And so we can make that psychological horse very strong. The emotional horse can be the most fraught, because unless you're working with someone as a therapist or someone, whoever you're working with, if they haven't dealt with their own emotional wounds, then they're afraid to go there still. And so when you come to present those emotional wounds, and you recognize that that person has, you will recognize it deep down that they're afraid of you going there, therefore you won't go there. You can't take someone where you haven't been. It's that simple. If you haven't done the work, if you haven't plowed through your own psyche and sorted a few things out, then you cannot take someone along that path, because you haven't dared to go there yourself. And your client sitting in front of you will know the difference. But there are many wonderful ways that you can work with the emotional body, okay? Feel your feelings. Just feel them. Whenever you feel anything, breathe it up, hold the inner child, remind it it's going to be okay. These are just feelings. When you feel guilt, which is what parents initially filled you with, and it's one of the most toxic emotions of ever, rather than, and it's so painful, we'll do anything, including sell our soul to the devil to get rid of it. Take that pain body and put it over there and say, well, that's what you're feeling, but what does the adult in me want to do? No, I'm not going to act in ways that are not in my benefit to make that feeling go away, okay? And each time you do that, you are habituating guilt out of your system. The next time it comes along, it won't be as strong and it won't last as long. And each time you say no to guilt, eventually you'll habituate it out of your system, and it doesn't take that long, and it's a bloody good feeling to get rid of because it's shit, okay? So there are wonderful books you can get, by the way, that really help you understand this stuff about the mind and the heart. Stuff by John Bradshaw, who was very big some decades ago. He does a lot of stuff on the inner child, really helps you understand the roles that you're allocated in the family. So anything by John Bradshaw, particularly around healing the inner child, useful stuff. A lot of that stuff you can do at home, or you can come and see me or someone like me. It's really good to read things like Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dwyer. It was the first book he ever wrote, I think, and his best, that helps you understand what you're doing in your mind. It's mind-blowing. In terms of understanding the cognitive distortions you play on your mind, read books like Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda, or The 10 Dumbest Mistakes That Smart People Make, okay? Filled with exercises to help you bust the prison bars open. And with the emotional work, you know, it's good to actually encounter regressive work. Actually brings those original wounds that have you shut down to the surface for clearing, and you walk out an hour later and you're done. It's that simple, okay? And suddenly so much is liberated from your life. And as for the spiritual horse, well, we don't have spirituality in the West, as I'm sure you've noticed. We have what's called religion. And religion is about giving your power to the priestly class so that they can get you to God. It's a lot of bollocks. It's crowd control. It's to keep the priestly class and those in power yet again. Treat it with the contempt it deserves. You are God. In every fibre of your being, in every cell of your body, you are God. You don't need anyone's permission to get there. You are it, but it has been robbed from you, and you need to rediscover it for the sake of your spiritual horse, okay? And there are many ways of doing that. There are many paths to the mountaintop, okay? But start a path. Yoga. Mine was shamanism. I mean, I'd looked at a million things beforehand, trust me. I've been a searcher all my life. But when I found the shamanic path, and that led into transpersonal counseling and philosophy and art and doing treks in the desert for 5 days at a time on vision quests and, you know, getting past the mind and into who am I really, what is underneath all this, the examination of my life, getting shamanic healing, doing Reiki. There are a lot of pathways to the mountaintop. Find your own. Experience experiments with various things until you find something that resonates with you and do that. But we are meant to be doing that all of our life. The day you stop learning, beloveds, the day you stop peeling back the story, and don't begrudge the story. You knew it was coming when you came. You know, it's like underneath that pressure of the tar and the coal, we are being forged as diamonds. And when we arise back out of the story, diamonds indeed we are. But we are filled with knowledge and wisdom and insight. We've pushed the boulders out the way so that people then we take on the same path as us, they walk a much gentler path because we've dared to do it. But the day you stop learning and growing and peeling back the layers of the onion, and oh my God, there are so many layers to the onion. The day you stop doing that, you may as well be dead. And the really sad thing for a lot of people is that they reach the age of about 50 and wait to die. See it all the time. And you see a lot of people at that age onwards walking around with that cat's bum mouth. Life's bitter. It never gave me what I want. Well, you never reached in and grabbed it by the throat. You never peeled back the lies. Heidegger, brilliant German philosopher, explains it in his treatise on being and time. You know, this and Trail, my dear friend again, gave me a very simple, I mean, have you ever tried reading Being and Time? Jesus wept. Just open it up to any page and be overwhelmed. But he used to walk around in the rain doing it all the time. Now, but he could break it down then. But he describes Heidegger's approach to life as the tripartite nature of being. The first part of it is that we are fallen, we are thrown into life, into a culture, into a historicity, into a story that says this is how you will be. And then you act it out, as I said, like the script of a play, stunted and thwarted in your emotional body that is actually the key to set you free. But over time, you must learn to extricate yourself from that story, which is the second part of the tripartite nature of being, and understand, well, who am I really? What is it all about? And then when you understand and gain connection to that, now a lot of people at that point go and sit in a cave and be a hermit and pray for humanity for a long time. It's very easy to do that, by the way. But that's not why we're here. I love the people that do that. They are helping humanity. But our job is to reinsert ourselves, the third part of the tripartite nature of being, to reinsert ourselves back into the world of which we are a part and change it. And help people understand that they too can change themselves and grow and evolve. So it's your job to understand, what are my four horses doing? How's my physical horse? How's my emotional horse? How's my psychological horse? And how's my spiritual horse? And you need to work with all of them and gradually bring them up so that then as you insert yourself back into the life that you chose, you can find what makes your heart sing, and those four horses, you just turn them and bang, you're there. So this is how, in a very simplistic way, how we're disempowered in life. How our emotions are taken away from us and it makes us stunted and emotionally crippled in a very real way so that we cannot process the day-to-day things that are going on. And all of that emotion gets built up in our bodies, making us sick, in a variety of ways, physically, psychologically, making us sick until we are forced by the calamities of our existence to say, what is it that's actually going on? It's like this great pressure. And once that pressure is behind the damn wall, it starts leaking. It starts tipping over the spillway. And you start getting angry at things that aren't actually angry provoking. You start snapping at your children. But deep down, it's not about your children at all. You start gossiping about your friends or your colleagues, Or someone will say something and suddenly you're biting their head off, and it's got nothing to do with that. It's anger leaking, okay? Or you sit down to watch Bambi or a kid's movie and suddenly you're bawling your eyes out, okay? It's got nothing to do with the movie. It's that well of grief that wants expression. Or you start behaving in anxious and neurotic ways where you can't get out of the house until you've checked the lock 48 times to make sure it's locked. All of these are a response to that crippling of the 4 horses, okay? So nurture each of the horses. Find what makes your heart sing. Reclaim your life. Extricate yourself from the script. Figure out who you are and then reinsert yourself in a way that makes your heart sing. And you're here to help everyone wake up. It's why we're here. So learn to manage your horses. And I'll leave it there because it's a very simplistic overview of how we are disempowered in life, but it's a pretty accurate one in some ways. And it gives you a bit of overview as to what you can do about it. But the first thing is to start loving yourself, being patient with yourself. Be the lioness in your own jungle. Start caring for yourself first. And then things will change quite dramatically, okay? And you become a great role model for your children and all around you, because when you're coming from that heart space and you've cleared the decks and you don't buy any of those bullshit stories that people have about you or your family has about you or anybody else has about you, because everything that comes out of somebody else's mouth is about the person speaking, not you. Stop personalizing people's shit. Everything is the mirror, and when someone's dumping on you or making you wrong, that's their mirror. They're not seeing you, they're seeing their projection of you. So stop buying into it. Simply say, thank you for your interpretation of my reality. Or, actually, I don't make you angry. Don't let people do that to you. You make me feel. No, you don't make anyone feel anything. If you're feeling anything, it's 100% your responsibility. And if anyone else is feeling anything, that's their choice and their responsibility. Yes, they've been programmed to feel certain ways in certain times, in certain events, but it's still theirs. They're the ones that have to come to terms with it and deal with it. So when someone says to you, you make me angry, you say, no, I don't. No, I don't. I'm not that powerful. If you're choosing to feel angry at something I've said or done or failed to do, that's your choice and your responsibility. Deal with it. I've got enough shit of my own to deal with, thank you. I'm happy to talk to you about it. But don't let people give their power to you, because if you accept that and you've made them angry, then you're the one that's got to fix it, and you can't fix it, so you're left with a perpetual sense of frustration and helplessness and guilt and shame for not doing it. And don't ever give your power away. Don't ever say to someone, you make me sad, you make me angry, you make me afraid. No, you don't. When you're behaving like an asshole, I get angry. Stop it. Okay, that's the difference. When you behave like that, I feel angry. But you're feeling it, you control it, you own it. So what's your language? It matters. Don't let people give their power to you. You do have enough to do in this life without being shackled with the burden of their responsibility. But don't give your power away. Learn to reframe it. When you do this, I feel, because I, and this is what I want. Yeah? You begin to get the picture. So thank you for indulging me on day 9, my loves. And good luck with all that, okay? And remember, if you ever get stuck or you want to clear something out of the way, just, send me a message. I'm more than happy to help, okay? This is my life's work. We're all waking up. This is our life's work. Setting ourselves free from the bullshit and reclaiming our life and daring to be the lioness in our own jungle and setting ourselves free. All right, darlings. Well, I hope the lighting was a little better. I'm not sure. We might try something else again tomorrow. But in the meantime, journey well. And the weekend is coming. And so is another nasty taste of winter. Take care, lovies. Bye.